Hello traders, welcome back. In this video, we are going to be discussing about the ADX, the average directional index. Now, I'm sure you must have watched a lot of videos about ADX in the past, but I definitely have something more to share. And it's something that is often overlooked by traders, and I personally use it, and I thought of sharing it with you. Now, before we proceed, I request you guys to subscribe to my channel, and I also have a Telegram channel. So in case if you want to join the channel, it's free. I have left the link in the description below. Right? So watch the video till the end. I'm sure you'll find it helpful. So let's begin. Now, as most of you know, what you have on my screen is the average directional index. Now, this is a very, you can call this even, you can even use it as a strategy. But what is more important is to understand what the ADX does. Now, I'm sure that for all of you who know about ADX, you know that the ADX has three components. Now, you have the plus DI line, which in this case is the green line here. You have the minus DI line, which is the red line, and you have the blue line, which is the actual ADX line, right? Now, for those of you who don't know, the green line denotes the buyers, the red line denotes the sellers, and this blue line, which is the ADX, this is not telling you anything about the buyers and the sellers, but it's simply telling you that how strong is the trend, right? So it's irrelevant of the buyers and sellers. If you see an ADX line, which is the blue line in this case, if you see that the line is rising, then it simply means that there is a strong trend in that direction. So what you see on my screen here, the portion that I'm marking here, right here you can see very clearly that there was an uptrend, and you can see that the green line, which is the buyers, that was trending above the sellers, right? So which means that the green line is above the red line. It basically means that the buyers are in control, and you can see there was a rising ADX, which means that the buyers are in control, and of course there is a strong trend, right? So this is simply the ADX. It just has three components, and this is how it works. Now, what most traders do is that they use 20 as a threshold level. So you can either use 20 or 25. Now, 20 or 25 is the threshold level that most traders would use. Now, I am using 20 in this case, and a typical strategy or something that you've always heard is that you take positions irrespective whether you're going long or short, it doesn't really matter. Whenever you see the ADX crossing the 20 and it is rising, right? So in this case, you can see that the ADX line was rising, and when it was rising, you can see that the green line is also rising. It basically means that the buyers are in control, right? So you take a long position. Now, this is what you would see in most of the videos, that you simply track the blue line, and if the blue line crosses the 20 and starts rising, then depending whoever is in control, whether it's the green line or the blue line, you take a trade in that direction, right? But what happens is that most often the green line and the red line is not really spoken about. So typically what traders would look at is that whenever you have the green line and the red line intersecting with each other, so here you can see that the red line is intersecting the green line. So the negative DI line is what it's called. So I simply call it the seller's line intersected the buyer's line, right? So it basically tells you that the sellers are in control, and you can see that the price is falling. So typically, if you are only looking at the green and the red line cross, there is always a high chance of getting a lot of fake signals. So here you can see there are so many crosses here, right? And the ADX line was dropping. So simply looking at just the green and the red line is not going to help you. But here's what you can do. What you can do is that you can use the green and the red line similar to how you use the ADX line. Now let me explain what I mean by this. So here you can see in this example, the ADX was rising, right? So if you look at this example, you never really had a chance of looking at ADX. So ADX never really fell below 20, and ADX was trading above the 20. But what I would do is I would use the green line as a trigger line. So every time the green line crosses the 20, so in this case, you can see that the intersection happened here. This is where the intersection happened. You can see that the green and the red line crossed each other. and the ADX was already above the 20, right? But what I would do, I will wait for the green line to cross the 20. So here you can see when the green line crossed the 20 right here, and the ADX was already trending. And post that, you had an almost like a 266 pip move, right? And similarly, you will use the red line. So in this case here, you can see that the red line crossed the 20 and the ADX was already trading above the 20, and you had a drop in the currency pair. Now, what I am doing here is that since I'm using the ADX, what I'm doing is I'm doing something different. So one, I am looking at, instead of looking for the ADX to cross above the 20 and start rising, I am looking for situations where ADX is obviously trending, which means that the ADX is already above the 20, and I'm instead looking for a crossover or an intersection, or I'm looking for those points where either the plus DI, which is the buyer's line, or the minus DI, which is the seller's line, are crossing above the 20, right? Which basically gives me more confirmation that there is a lot of buying happening. So let me just tell you again. I'm looking for situations where ADX is already trending. By trending, I mean ADX is already above 20. And I'm looking for either the green line to cross the 20, which tells me that this is a buy signal, or I'm looking for a situation where the red line is crossing the 20, like here, and that basically tells me that it's a sell signal, right? So I'm looking for situations where the ADX is already trending above 20 and the red line or the green line is intersecting or it's crossing the 20, and that gives me the signal. Now, to make it more concrete, here's what I do. Because I am trading Forex, now I'm not sure how many of you have access to Light Finance. So basically, this broker was initially called Light Forex. Now, the name has changed and it's now Light Finance. In case if you don't have an account, you can always open a demo account with Light Finance. I have left the link in the description below, right? All you have to do is open a demo account with Light Finance. Make sure that you register on the website and open a demo account, right? Once you do it, you have to click on the market watch window right here. You click on right click, show all, and once you do that, you will have access to the currency index charts right here. So you have the Australian dollar, the Canadian, Swiss franc, euro, pound. So you have the currency index charts. Now what I'm doing is I will track ADX. Instead of tracking the pairs, I'm going to be tracking ADX on the individual index charts, right? I am not tracking pairs. I am going to be tracking this ADX on the individual index charts, right? Again, I repeat, not pairs, but the individual index charts. Now, second thing, what you need to do is you will not be using this ADX crossover, or rather the plus and minus, or the buyer and seller crossover of the 20 on smaller time frames. Instead, you will be watching this on the daily time frame, right? So first thing you do is that you track ADX on the individual index chart, right? And second thing that you're doing is that you are using it on the daily time frame, right? So what happens in the daily time frame? In the daily time frame, you're basically tracking what is happening in that given month, right? So here you have the AUD, you have the New Zealand, you have the CAD. Now let me show you a simple example of what has happened this year. I repeat, what has happened this year in the year 2022, and then we will look at some more examples so that you understand what I'm trying to tell you. Now here we have the daily time frame, and this is the pound index, right? So you can see this is the start of this year, and so this is Jan, and since then, if you can see, pound has been in a downtrend, right? And on the flip side, if you look at the Canadian dollar, you can see that the Canadian dollar has been on an uptrend. Now, what happens is, if you are tracking individual index charts first, right? You obviously have a heads up of which currency is really moving in the market. Now, in this case, let's say if you were looking at pound CAD. Now, let me show you this currency pair. Then you will understand that how you could use the index charts and combine it with the regular currency pair charts and then end up getting good trade setups. Now, these setups are not really intraday. You are looking at these setups, and the whole idea is to hold these trades for a longer period of time, right? So I'll show you this chart of what happened on the pound CAD this year. Okay, so and then we will look at some examples which will help you understand what I'm trying to tell you. So here's the pound CAD. Very clearly, you can see that the Canadian index was in an uptrend and the GBP was in a downtrend. So pound CAD had a downtrend. Now, if you look at pound CAD, or let's assume that you're looking at currency pairs, either or, you can, if you're tracking the index or you're tracking the pairs, the idea is to make sure that you match both of them. So if you're looking at pound CAD as a currency pair, then you would obviously, before you take a trade, you would obviously want to go back and check the individual index chart to understand if the trend is valid. So here you can see, if I have to simply look at a short position, or I'm looking at a sell position. So here you can see ADX was already up, and you had a signal where you had the sellers crossing the 20, and it was ADX was also rising along with it. So you want to see these actions happening simultaneously. You can see that the red crosses the 20 and the ADX started to rise. Now, this could be one potential entry. But now let's take a look at a second situation where you can see this is more clear, where the trend is already established. And here you can see that there was another signal where the red line crossed the 20. This is on March 23rd, and the ADX was already trending up, right? So you had an entry here. Then you had another entry, which is now, please bear in mind that we're looking at the daily time frame and not any smaller time frame. So again, you had a move up. So you can see how the seller's line started to continuously go up above the 20, and the ADX was also rising. So both of them were rising above the 20 level. And you can see when such situations happen, you can see that there are very strong trends that come in the coming days. Now, let's see what has happened on this currency pair this year. So if you look at the monthly chart, it's very clear, and here you can see what I'm trying to tell you. And this is why if you track this on higher time frames, you get less trades, but you get better trades. So here you can see this is in the month of Feb, when you can see how the sellers crossed the 20, right? This is the month of Feb. And you can see this year, pound CAD has been in a downtrend. So, you know, from the start of the year, for almost 6 months, this currency pair has only been dropping. And if you look at the monthly chart candles, you can see that it has been a very steady drop. And here you can see how the red line pierced the 20, and eventually after some time, the ADX also crossed the 20. But this red line crossing the 20, or the sellers crossing the 20, had already given you a hint that in advance that this currency pair will continue to fall, because you were looking at this on the monthly time frame. Now, if you go back to the weekly, here you can see right here, you can see that the red crossed the 20, and eventually the ADX did cross. So you can see somewhere around the month, towards the end of March, right? You can see since then, pound CAD has only been dropping. Now, if you have already identified currency pairs which are in strong downtrends on the monthly time frame, and you also have identified, so I'm simply saying, where you can see that these currency pairs are strongly trending. By trending, I mean that where you can see that either the plus DI or the minus DI along with the ADX is trending strongly, right, above the 20. So in this case, you can see it was trending above the 20. Here again, you can see both of them were trending above the 20, right? So this basically means ADX is telling you, of course, there is a very strong trend. Along with that, the sellers also moving in conjunction, tandem, both moving together, tells you that this trend is going to be even more stronger. Just looking at the ADX rising, correct, is not enough. If you look at this along with the plus and the minus DI line, you will see the results will change almost instantly. So now that you've identified that yes, monthly is in a strong downtrend, weekly is in a strong downtrend. So what could typically be your entry on a daily time frame? So your entry on a daily time frame would be, let's assume that we never picked up this trade when the trend began. I don't even want to I don't even want to be in this trend, let's say very early, because I've already identified that there's a very strong downtrend on the monthly and the weekly, right? So what would your entry be? So you can see your entry, you had an entry here where the ADX was already, so you've already identified that the monthly and the weekly is trending. So here you can see you had one entry. Then again, the next month you had an entry. So I'm just marking these vertical lines to tell you how it works. And so you had entries and literally you had small positions. So let's say you've taken small positions or you've just risked 1% of your account balance and you let these trades run and you just scale in to this existing trend, you will see that the amount of pips you can grab on really small lots is much more safer than really trading every single day, right? So all I'm trying to tell you is that your job is first to identify which is that currency pair which is really trending. Now, for those of you who don't have access to Light Forex, this is the option that you'll have to choose, where you'll have to look at currency pairs, 28 currency pairs, and identify those pairs which are indeed trending. When I say trending, you're looking at those currency pairs on the monthly, weekly, and you want to identify those currency pairs where both the ADX or the plus and minus DI are trading above the 20. You want to see a move that is happening simultaneously, and these are the moves that will give you uh, easier pips. It's far more easy, and it's also stress free at the same time. You don't really have to monitor your trades every single every hour. You just have to monitor them maybe once in a day or maybe once in a couple of days, because the whole idea is that you've already identified a very strong downtrend on the monthly and the weekly, and you're taking entries on the daily time frame. Now, for those of you who have light forex or who have access to light finance, then your life becomes a little more easy because you're only tracking the 8 currency index. So for example, this year, if you click on the US dollar, so you can see very clearly this is US dollar, this is the start of the year, and we know that the dollar has been trending up. Now this is the monthly chart, and here you can see the ADX was already trading up, and you can see how starting the month of March or towards the end of Feb, you can see this green line crossing the 20 right here, and they were gradually going up, right? It's like a simultaneous move. Now you can see on the weekly time frame, same situation on the US dollar. You can see how the ADX was rising above the 20 and the plus DI was also trending above the 20, right? And you can see how the sellers and the buyers, there's this nice gap between the two of them. This basically tells you that there is buying happening, right? Not just looking at the ADX, but in conjunction with the plus DI line. So when you look at both of them simultaneously, you could see that yes, monthly is trending, weekly is trending. And then now that you've already identified that there is buying happening in the US dollar, then it becomes easier for you, or at least you know now that you are going to look for only buying opportunities in the dollar, right? Finding currency pairs becomes much more easy because now you've identified that at least you know for a fact by looking at the index charts and by looking at the monthly and the weekly that I have to look for buying opportunities in the US dollar. Similarly, if you look at the yen, right, this is again this year. Here you can see how the yen, so this has happened. Now here, if you look at the monthly chart, this is almost towards the end of 2020. So you can see since the end of 2020, yen has, you can see how these both the ADX and the green line started to move up strongly together. and you can see you had a nice trend in 2020. Then of course there was this slight pause, and again this year you can see how the yen is moving up. So just by looking at the ADX and the plus DI and both trending above the 20, you knew that you can look at positions. Now in this case, because it's light finance, so basically there is a lot of selling that is happening in the yen. Now if you look at the dollar yen chart, you'll very clearly see what happened this year. So this is the monthly time frame, and here you can see ADX was nicely rising, and you can see how the plus DI was also trading above the 20, and then you had the weekly. You can see you had this nice sharp rising plus DI. This is start of the year itself. This is somewhere around March, and then you have on the daily time frame. So you can see on the daily time frame again, you had this nice setups that came in. So if you look at this right here, you had this setup here where the ADX was up, and you can see how the green line, the plus DI, crossed the 20 and started rising sharply. Again, you had a similar situation in the month of June. So you can see just by identifying the index charts itself, you know which currency you should be looking at buying or selling. Similarly, now if you look at the yen, the British pound, this is the British pound. If you look at the monthly time frame, you can very clearly see how the ADX, you can see this, the ADX was above the 20, and you can see how sharply this red line, the minus DI line, crossed, right? You can see it, how sharply it crossed. And as a result, because you know that the dollar is already in a trend, and you've already seen pound is already in a downtrend, you can see as a result of that, this is the pound USD, and this is the monthly. So you can see how if you are looking at the currency pair, you can see ADX was already up, so which means there was a trend. You just had to identify which trend was it, and there was no trend until you saw this sharp move happening. And when this started crossing the 20, this was a first signal that yes, there is a lot of selling happening. And you got confirmation about this because you were looking at the US dollar and the pound, and since you had tracked it on the monthly, you can see what happened after that. Right here, you can see how this year the pound USD has only been dropping. The reason being, if you look at the US dollar just on the monthly time frame, this is the year 2022. You can see how this ADX was already trending. The plus DI line crosses the 20, even that starts to trend. And similarly, you can see similar situation on the pound, but in the opposite direction. And what do we say? We obviously want to trade a strong currency against a weak currency. And because of that, when you can see the pound USD on the monthly, you can see it on the weekly, and you can see it on the daily. So if you are looking at the daily time frame, then at least you know now that you are looking at short entries, or you're looking to short the currency pair. And you can see that just by looking at the daily time frame, you would have had some really good opportunities to look for sell opportunities, because here you can see ADX was already trending. You can see how the minus DI, the sellers crossed the 20 sharply. You can see there was a fall after that. You can see again here there was a sharp rise up along with ADX rising. You can see after that for the next few days there was a drop. Again, you can see this is last month. You can see a sharp rise here, and you can see after that for a couple of days there was a nice sharp drop, right? So this basically allows you to scale in with small lots, even if you can risk maybe like 1% of your account balance, or for that matter you can just fix a lot size, maybe like a micro lot, 0.05, 0.03, depending on your account balance and how much you're willing to risk. Because what happens is, because you've already identified the long-term trend, you are simply taking small positions and scaling into the existing trend that you've already identified by tracking the currency index charts. So what you need to remember in this video is, if you have access to light finance, great. You can track the 8 currency index, and you will come to know which currency is really moving the market, right? Second, you have to start looking at the ADX along with the plus and the minus DI line, and you start looking at from the monthly weekly, because once you identify monthly, the weekly, and then you go down to the daily, you know which currency, uh, in which currency there's buying happening or which currency there's selling happening. And you can look at the daily time frame chart as an entry chart with a very small lot, or typically 1% risk, or maybe even less than that, because the idea is to keep that trade open for a very long time. Right now, I understand that this may sound very weird, because a lot of times you have videos where we are only talking about intraday or 1 hour or 2 hour or 3 hours. But what you've seen in this video, or even if you look at these individual charts, I'm sure you would have identified by now that these moves just have gone on for months together, right? And it's obvious that if these moves are happening, there are traders, there are people in the world who are sitting on these positions from many months, right? The only idea is to understand which currency is really moving the market. So at least by looking at this, one thing is very clear, that this year the dollar was really moving, the yen was moving, and similarly, if I have to give you an example of what happened this month, you can see this is the euro, right? So we are in July this month, and you can see how there was ADX was already about 20 trending, and you can see this sharp move up on the minus day when it's crossed the sellers crossed the 20 and started to rise, and there was a drop in the euro. If you look at the weekly, you can see a similar situation on the weekly, and on the monthly, euro has already been in a downtrend. So this would give you a heads up that you can look for entry on the euro dollar. And you can see what happened on the euro dollar this month. There was this drop, and of course right now there is this consolidation happening. But in any case, you can't be looking for any trade in the euro dollar. The reason being, you can see very clearly, you have the ADX, you can see there is no trend, and you can see that both the red and the green line are falling down. So you obviously want to see them rise. You don't want to see them fall down below 20. So when you see them again rise, just like how it happened just before the start of July, you can see how it was rising. So you want to see a rising seller's line or a rising buyer's line along with the ADX. And because you're tracking the daily, weekly, and the monthly, it becomes more stress free to enter these trades and then let them run. What I would suggest you to do is that you can open a demo account, you can try it on your own, take small lots, and just let them run, right? Just try this out for a couple of weeks, and you'll automatically understand what I'm trying to tell you, right? So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye bye.